utilize your two healthy running backs. And by the way, you only have 3 games left, so to hell with sort of workload, right? Just run them. If Daniel Highshaw wants the ball, give him the ball. He's only got 3 games. He's only got potentially 3 games left in his career. So give him the damn ball, right? Give the ball to LeSean Williams. That is what I want to see. Pay heed all who enter and beware of this podcast. That's right. This is the Pay Heed podcast on the Kansas City Sports Network. I'm Nick Springer, and of course, I'm here with Kevin Flaherty. We're brought to you by Emprise Bank, your partner in all things possible, member FDIC. If you're joining us today, you should be doing 3 things, especially on YouTube. You should be liking the video, subscribing to the channel, and leave a comment to share your thoughts. We love to hear from great KU fans, so you can join in on the conversation with us and like the channel, or subscribe to the channel, like the video. If you're on audio only, of course, you can still subscribe on Apple and Spotify. That helps us out as well. And leave us a 5-star rating and review. We really appreciate you if you do those things. If you want to hear some KU basketball talk, we broke down KU's opening game against Green Bay, plus a little preview of North Carolina this weekend earlier in the week. Be sure to check that out. Also have plenty of audio from head coaches and players you can check out on our YouTube channel at Kansas Jayhawks KCSN. Bill Self spoke on Wednesday morning ahead of the trip to Carolina on Friday. Also had a chance to hear from Lance Leipold earlier in the week, and as well as some players and coordinators for KU football. So be sure to go check out all that good stuff over on our YouTube channel if you haven't already. And once again, like all those videos and all that good stuff. We very much appreciate it. We are going to be previewing KU and Arizona on the gridiron on today's show. Kansas heading out to Tucson to play Arizona for the first time since Arizona has joined the Big 12 Conference. So Kansas will be facing a new opponent, basically, heading out there to take on the Wildcats. And this is a game, and this is kind of where I wanted to start this conversation, Kevin, when previewing this game, is this is one where in the preseason and even, at the start of the season, I kind of looked at this Arizona game as like, yeah, it's a road game, but I feel pretty confident this should be a game where KU should be favored and should win, based off of Arizona kind of, falling flat last year in their first year under Brent Brennan as head coach in Arizona. And, there was even I think there was at one point some discussion about, did they make the right hire? Was that the right choice? And then over the course of this season, with kind of how the season has gone for both KU and Arizona, I have a much different outlook on this game than I did even maybe a month ago. And that's because Arizona has quietly put together a pretty solid season this year. And so I'm just wondering what your perspective on that is. Like, did you feel similarly about this game, maybe in the preseason, early in the season, versus maybe how you feel about it with it coming up in just a few days?
No, I thought you put that perfectly. I think heading into this season, there were so many issues with last year's Arizona team. And one of them was you looked at the talent on that roster with, Fafita, you have a first-round pick, obviously a wide receiver. You've got other talent out there. And the offense wasn't nearly as good, and the defense struggled. And so you're looking at it, you're saying, how do you struggle with those pieces? And I think my thought line, and I don't think I'm alone in this, was, well, gosh, like Brent Brennan came in and ruined everything that Jed Fish basically had created to that point. And credit to him, his staff, this team, they've come out and, like you said, had a really nice season. And so I think, I'm not sure when the point was that I started to see this game differently. It might have been after Arizona beat K-State, even with K-State's early struggles. But either way, I think heading in this week, when you watch Arizona, when you look at the players and the types of seasons that they're having, you look at this vastly differently than maybe you did, even just a month or two ago. I do think you're absolutely right about that.
Yeah, it really is an interesting timeline, Kevin, when you consider what this Arizona team could have been. I mean, you think about Noah Fafita and Tet McMillan, they could have easily transferred and left after Jed Fish left, and then they end up sticking around, and obviously kind of things don't go well for them last season in their first year, but it's really been kind of a complete 180. And then when you start to look a little bit deeper at what this Arizona team has accomplished so far this season, Kevin, they could be just a couple plays away from being 7-1 right now. I mean, they're sitting at 5-3 they had the big loss against Iowa State, but then they have an overtime loss against BYU, who's now top 10. They play at Houston and lose on a last second field goal. And then they just absolutely it's a complete demolition of Colorado. I mean, just
Yeah.
complete implosion on Colorado's part, and Arizona took advantage. And so, yeah, now all of a sudden I'm feeling a little nervous about this game because I also, on the flip side of that, I can't exactly say that I'm supremely confident in Kansas at the moment either. I mean, it's hard to shake the vestiges of the K-State game, and after Oklahoma State, we kind of talked about on our post game show where KU did everything right, but they did what they needed to do, and they established a little bit more confidence. But even still, I mean, I'm still nervous heading into this one.
Yeah, I 100% understand it. There's a reason that Arizona is now favored, right? And when you look at this game, I think I hate to call it a make or break game, Nick, because both teams, have games left on the slate, obviously, that could go another way. But I do think that one of these two teams could get to 7-5, 8-4, and the winner of this game will basically determine which one it is. And I think when you look at Kansas, if you find a way to win this game and then go have your bye week, and then you have a banged up Iowa State team on the other side of that, you feel pretty good about your chances to maybe get that seventh win. On the other hand, if you lose this game to Arizona, and if you lose it in a certain fashion, you're looking at that Iowa State game and saying this is a must win just to get to a bowl. The flip side is I think if Arizona, winds up winning this game, you do have a tough game at Cincinnati, but then you play Baylor and you get at Arizona State, and Arizona State has been a little bit hit and miss at times. That's a game, with it being a rivalry game as well, that Arizona could show up well in it. And so both of these teams have the chance to still go 8-4. Both of these teams, if they win this game, maybe even have a better than average shot to go 7-5. And so that makes this game pretty important.
Yeah, it's a huge game for Kansas because you want to get to bowl eligibility. I know Arizona could get to it as well, but yeah, it's a huge game just from that perspective. And we kind of been kicking around this idea, especially after the K-State game, of after a loss like that, what does it take to get fans to sort of buy back into the season, right? It felt like so much was building to that game. And then, how do you get people to buy back in? One way to buy back in is to go earn yourself bowl eligibility and get yourself into a bowl game. That's one way to do it. And there was some talk about that this week, I think, among, when we had a chance to hear from some of the players and coaches, but also there was a lot of sort of what we've come to be used to with Lance Leipold, which is it's another game. You want to go 1-0 this week. You're not focused too much on that, but even still, it's hard not to think about that because this is a program that feels like it needs that, right? Because of the fact that you missed out on it last year. In what was supposed to be, a pretty significant year for you. And so it feels like that's something that is needed. And this, despite the fact that you and I have both sort of professed some nervousness about this game, this still on paper feels like the best shot for you to achieve that goal, right? Like, I know KU has owned Iowa State has owned Iowa State, and they won in Ames the last time they played there, but like, this still, to me, feels a little bit more winnable as we sit here right now today, heading into this game, I guess, than I think I would feel about Iowa State or Utah to end the year. I don't know if you feel the same.
I feel a little bit differently. Swain felt the same way as you do, in that he thinks this is the most winnable of the ones left. I feel like the Iowa State one is slightly more winnable, but I mean, I think you could make an argument for either of those games. And it's interesting because I think, the line is what, like Arizona by 3.5, something like that.
It has moved pretty significantly at times, yes.
The reason I ask is I think if you look at like ESPN's SP Plus, that season, it may not have been SP Plus. It may have been one of the other indexes, but on a lot of them, Arizona is favored by like 8 points. And so it's interesting to see in that, like you said, because KU got blown out by Texas Tech, because KU got blown out by K-State, KU's number is going down because Arizona has played in close games, as you mentioned, and like KU's team a year ago, there's not as much of a fallout from those losses. And so I think Arizona being the favored team right now, some would even say touchdown or more favorite. It's going to be a tough one to get across the finish line. And when we get into this game specifically and matchups and all of those things, Nick, I'll tell you in part why I think that this is the more difficult one to win. I'm not sure KU matches up super well with Arizona when you look at Kansas's strengths versus Arizona's strengths and weaknesses as well.
Yeah, and we will dive into that a little bit more on the other side of the break. One more final thing I kind of wanted to just point out, just generally here heading into this game is, there are some similarities at the quarterback position between these two teams with Fafita and with Jalen Daniels, and two guys that have stayed at their programs and two guys that I think have had some ups and some downs, and both have sort of experienced a little bit of a renaissance in some ways this season. We look at the numbers. I know Jalen Daniels had really struggled against K-State. He was Jim Zabrowski described him as solid against Oklahoma State. That I thought was a little generous. I didn't think he was I don't know that I would have used the term solid, but even still. And then you look at what Fafita's done this year. He's second in the conference, I think, in yards right now in terms of passing behind Sawyer Robertson. And he's been, pretty strong. Or I guess he's third in the conference. He's also behind Josh Hoover. But he's been, really good. 21 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. So he's, again, I think in a similar boat to Jalen Daniels and sort of experiencing this sort of resurgence in his final season. So I don't know. I thought that was just sort of an interesting little parallel there between those two players. We will dive deeper into this matchup specifically, and I do want to hear your thoughts on some of what you teased there, Kevin. Let's take a quick break first. And when we do that, that gives us a chance to remind you that you could be on the field inside GEHA Field at the 50-yard line for the official coin toss at a Chiefs home game this season. Visit Chiefs.com/GEHA now. Enter to win for a chance to be on the field for a once-in-a-lifetime view of the pregame coin toss. Plus, you can score the exclusive prizes. Enter for a chance to win at Chiefs.com/GEHA. GEHA is a proud partner of the Kansas City Chiefs. We'll dive deeper into this matchup coming up next.
I'm Brett Goodwin, one of the owners of The Learning Tree. The Learning Tree is a neighborhood toy store in Prairie Village, Kansas. This has been here in this location since 2000s, and my husband Alan and I purchased the store in 2023. Alan and I grew up in families where we've always wanted to have a business together. Alan grew up, for instance, his parents had a jewelry store. I worked in a local toy store here in Prairie Village when I was growing up. When this opportunity happened in 2023, we knew right away we wanted to contact them and pursue the store. We wouldn't have been able to get the store without the team at Emprise Bank. From the day we contacted them, they knew what we needed to do, which was very helpful. I would absolutely recommend the team at Emprise Bank to anyone looking to secure a business. We worked with Emprise from day one. They were extremely helpful. They were always great resources. We talk to them frequently. They know the area. They're very friendly. We know who we're going to talk with, and they know what we need to do. We hope we'll see you at the Learning Tree.
This is the Pay Heed podcast on the Kansas City Sports Network. I'm Nick Springer, along with Kevin Flaherty. Of course, we're brought to you by Emprise Bank, your partner in Possible, member FDIC. If you've not already, please subscribe on Apple and Spotify over on our audio platforms and also on our YouTube channel at Kansas Jayhawks KCSN. You'll definitely want to be subscribed there because we will be live on Saturday afternoon following the conclusion of the KU and Arizona football game to share our instant reaction and thoughts. And you can join us there over on our YouTube channel at Kansas Jayhawks KCSN. And the best way to ensure that you know when we go live is to, A, I guess just watch the game because we'll be going live after the game. But B, more importantly, Kevin, is to subscribe and turn on those notification bells so that you know exactly when we go live. So if you do those things, come hang out with us. Come join us on Saturday afternoon for our reaction to KU and Arizona. All right, let's dive a little bit deeper into this matchup. Kevin, you teased a couple things that I'm curious to hear you expand a little bit more on. I will say this, I mentioned in the first segment there, Arizona has had a bit of a 180 this season in many respects compared to what they did last year, and that is most notable in their defense.
Yes.
Their defense went from a bottom 25 defense in the country last year by most analytics, most stats you look at, to a top 20 defense basically this year, depending on where you're looking. And they've been really strong in the Big 12. They actually have the number one pass defense in the Big 12 right now, giving up just over 155 yards per game passing. So they've been really strong there. So that's really been where you could start and circle the biggest difference between this team, I think, from a year ago. We'll talk about the offense too, but just specifically on the defensive side first, like that's been the biggest difference for them. Is last year they really struggled defensively, and this year they've made a not even a to say they've made a significant improvement is probably understating a little bit. They've made a truly astronomical jump in what their defense has been this year compared to last season.
Yeah, and what's the main thing that KU typically wants to do offensively? It's throw the ball, right? And what's the thing that Arizona is best against? It's teams that throw the ball. When you look at the fact that Stokes has been maybe the Big 12's best corner so far, Cole actually isn't that far off. So they've got two really good corners, and then Dalton Johnson and Genesis Smith at the safeties. Their back end is as good as any that KU has faced or will face this year. And then you add in, guys like Chase Kennedy and Riley Wilson, as pass rushers. I'm not sure that Arizona's as good at the second level of the defense. When you look at those linebackers, they aren't bad there, but I do think they're capable of getting some pass rush, and they're more than capable of blanketing Kansas's receivers with that group in the defensive backfield.
Yeah, that'll be certainly a matchup to watch. And that's why I am looking at this game, Kevin, and saying, okay, for the first time basically all season against Oklahoma State, you had a healthy LaShawn Williams and a healthy Daniel Highshaw, and it looked pretty good. Both of them were pretty effective. And now you're about to play a team that's pretty strong in the back end and has a pretty good secondary. So I would say, okay, let's make the game plan, run the football, run the ball. Run the damn ball. HB dive. Give it to Daniel Highshaw. Give it to LaShawn Williams. This would be the time to maybe show off some quarterback run plays. That wink, wink, nudge, nudge that we keep asking where they are, if they even exist at this point. This is the game to do more of that, because it'll accomplish two things. Number one, you'll be going up against what is perceived to be the weaker aspect of Arizona's defense this season. Number two, your guys are healthy, like I just said. Number three, that's also going to keep Arizona's offense off the field as well, and you can play a little bit more ball control. So that is, I guess, my number one key when I just look at this game is, okay, the stars are aligning. You finally have your two top running backs fully healthy, it would seem. Let's utilize them in a game where you're going up against a team that has been strong against the pass this season.
Yeah, if it's a 41-38 game, I don't think KU wins. If it's a 31-28 game, I think KU's got a much better shot. And so the run game becomes a huge part of what you do. And I think even beyond all the reasons you mentioned, you don't want to get into obvious passing situations. If you feel like, hey, let's throw the ball on first down, that's fine. I'm not saying you should abandon the pass or anything like that. What I am saying is try to avoid situations where the other team knows you have to throw the ball, where you're in, 3rd and 10, 3rd and 8, situations like that. And one of the ways that you can do that is by being effective with the running game, like you mentioned. And I think the other thing is the running game is one of those things that has a cumulative effect over the course of a game. You may not be breaking big gains right away with the way the other team's playing, but if you keep a steady diet of, hey, these three guys, and by three guys I mean Jalen Daniels and your two running backs. Of course, I wouldn't hate it if Zeke Marshall got the odd carry in there too.
I wouldn't hit that either.
But what I'm saying is whatever happens in the first quarter, if you stick with it, it has a chance to be even more effective later in the game. And so I think this is one where I would go in and say, hey, let's build off the success we had a week ago when you were able to run the ball so effectively, and go out and try and run the ball in this one, put yourself into more convertible situations. And Nick, I know we've kind of joked around about the lack of option going on. I'm still holding out hope for the odd option play out there to let them see what they have. Although, to be honest with you, I wouldn't even mind it if they gave, the odd, jet sweep carry to Cam Pickett or things like that, plays that are runs, and they, that are runs, even if they aren't actually called runs because you're throwing a little forward pass or whatever.
Well, Kevin, there's only 3 games left. So if the option plays exist, if they're in the room with us, please let us know and use them if you have them. I'm begging you, please. But yeah, and beyond that, Jim Zabrowski, he didn't quite outright admit it, but he did sort of suggest or insinuate maybe that there have been games this season, and I think it's pretty obvious from our perspective, there's been games this season where KU has put maybe too much on the shoulders of Jalen Daniels, right? Where they've said, okay, you know what? We're just going to live and die with Jalen. And there's been games, and we've seen games where he's played very well and given them a chance, right? You think about the Cincinnati game, you think about even the Missouri game. And there's been games where he hasn't played well, and you've seen the result, which is more along the lines of, the K-State game and Texas Tech, right? But this is not a game where you need to do that. This is not a game where that needs to be necessary, right? Because of what we just mentioned with the run game and with having both those running backs healthy. Like, this should be a game where you should be able to take some of that pressure off of Jalen. And I think that'll help him play better too, truthfully.
Yeah.
Because the K-State game, it was obvious that, he was putting too much on himself, I think, just in general. And so take some of that off of him, utilize your two healthy running backs. And by the way, you only have 3 games left. So to hell with sort of workload, right? Just run him. If Daniel Highshaw wants the ball, give him the ball. He's only got 3 games. He's only got potentially 3 games left in his career. So give him the damn ball, right? Give the ball to LeSean Williams. That is what I want to see. I want to see a lot of that in this game, because I think you're attacking a perceived weakness of Arizona's defense, which is, the opposite of their strength, which is their pass defense. And also, you have your 2 running backs healthy for the first time really this season, besides the Oklahoma State game and maybe the start of the year. So use them and take that pressure off of Jalen Daniels. And then that should allow you to open things up by throwing the ball a little bit more, with Jalen Daniels. Because yes, like you said, when you have guys like Cam Pickett on the outside, and when you have a guy like Emmanuel Henderson on the outside, even Jim Brzezowski admitted it this week, like, there's a tendency to say, I need to draw up plays to get them the ball, right? Like, I need to design plays to get them the ball. I understand that, and I don't disagree with that. Get them the ball. Those guys are, electric, explosive players. So get them the ball. But also don't feel like you need to force it. Because against Oklahoma State, what happened? You had a play where you tried to force it to Emmanuel Henderson, and Cam Pickett was wide open, and you missed him. So there's a balance there, obviously. But yes, this game absolutely screams run first, run second, run often, and continue to feed your running backs to help open things up in the pass game and take some of that pressure off Jalen Daniels.
Yeah, and I think Jalen is obviously so effective as a runner too, but he's also effective in the running game, in that he makes the right reads in the running game so often. And so I think it's a way, usually when you say, hey, use the running game, you're talking about taking the ball out of your quarterback's hands. I'm not even talking about that. I think Jalen has a tremendous impact with the running game. And I think that allows him to tap into something that's a strength of his as well. And then let him throw off of that. Let him run play action, do some different things where, he's able to get some shot plays, because Arizona's worried about the fact that you just had a 10-play, 39-yard LeSean Williams drive. But in all seriousness, I do think that this is a game from that standpoint where maybe it's coming at the right time, because not only do you have both running backs being healthy, but Nick, that was almost as good an offensive line game as KU has had as well. Those guys are kind of brimming with confidence. Calvin Clements, is a guy that I know we've had some criticism for when he's deserved it. Well, what's the whole thing? Let the praise be as loud or whatever. Calvin Clements was great against Oklahoma State, and that was a defensive line that had done really well at stopping the run. And so your offensive line is trending in the right direction. Your running backs are trending in the right direction. I think it makes a lot of sense to kind of try and feed back into that again this week.
Yeah, especially when we saw against Oklahoma State more 6 offensive lineman looks, right? Because Kansas is a little thin at tight end. Okay, great. What's the best thing to do when you got 6 offensive linemen out there? Oh, run the ball more. Run the damn ball. There you go. Wow, look at that.
It's Nolan Gorska.
Now, that would be crazy. Flipping over to Arizona's offense, we touched on Fafita a little bit. He's had a resurgence this year. He's been really good for Arizona. And, funnily enough, speaking of, force feeding it to individual players, Kevin, in a weird way, it kind of seems like Fafita has been better without McMillan, because it's forced him to, spread the ball around and get more guys involved. And that seems to have helped him out a little bit this year. So he's been a lot better. But then one guy that I don't think a lot of people really highlight much with this Arizona team is the running back, Ishmael Mahdi. He is I watched him against K-State. He was explosive and was really, really good in that game. He's somebody to keep an eye on as well. So how do you think the KU defense might try to attack Arizona in this one?
From a skill position standpoint, and obviously Fafita is nowhere near as big, so you don't get the power run game element from the quarterback position. But from the other skill position stuff and from Fafita's ability to throw, it reminds you a lot of Cincinnati, right? Because Cincinnati had the running backs that they could get the ball to that were probably pretty underrated, in terms of how good those guys were. But the thing that really scared you, Nick, was it just felt like they had more receivers than you could cover on a given down. Like, okay, we're going to take this guy away and this guy away. Well, that's great, but we're just fine hitting Cyrus Allen out of the slot or whatever. And when you look at this Arizona receiving core, it's so deep with quality guys that you can't really focus on one guy. And I'm glad you brought that up because obviously, Tet McMillan's unbelievable. And I think he'll be a really good pro in addition to, how good he was in college. But Fafita is spreading that thing around to all over the place. And I think that does make this offense more difficult to stop than maybe it was a year ago because there isn't a receiver that is kind of the 1A on your scouting report where you say, hey, we got to find a way to slow this guy down. But the problem is any of those guys I feel like can be that, whether it's Hudson, whether it's Spivey, whether it's any of those guys, they can be that person on any given night. And that almost makes them more dangerous. The one difference I will say between Arizona and Cincinnati's offensive line is so freaking good. And Arizona's offensive line, I think, is decent. The center is pretty good, I think, but overall, and I think the tackles are good. The guards are kind of just all right. But I think that's one of the differences is I'm not sure that Arizona's offensive line is quite as good as Cincinnati's. But other than that, the ability for the quarterback to just kind of sit back and distribute all over the place, the ability for the running backs to take advantage if you drop guys back, and Mahdi being as explosive as he is, the skill guys do remind me a lot of Cincinnati's.
By the way, something crazy about you mentioned Trey Spivey there, who was transferred from K-State.
Yeah.
Kevin, he has 11 catches, 6 touchdowns.
6
touchdowns on 11 receptions. Like, that's insane. So I guess, keep an eye on him potentially in this game. But I will say the one aspect of Fafita that should give this KU defense a little bit of respite potentially is that he's not going to run as much, right? He's definitely not as significant of a threat to scramble. That's not to say that he won't scramble, but he's not a Sorsby type, right? He's not an Avery Johnson type, which Avery Johnson, he didn't even have to scramble against KU with his arm, but I guess neither Sorsby really either. But the point being, like, he's not so much of a dual threat that KU shouldn't have to worry about that as much in this game. But, something else to note, you talked about, Arizona having a lot of different options to throw the ball to. Well, Kansas is going to be without Saeed Gibbs for the first half of this game because of that late targeting call that he had against Oklahoma State. So that's one less cover guy and arguably one of your better cover guys, I think, on the outside, especially that you're going to be without for the first half of this game. So that's maybe something to keep an eye on as well. If Kansas struggles early in this game in pass coverage without Gibbs on the field, because you're going to be asking, again, Austin Alexander and DJ Graham to play on the outside quite a bit. It seems like KU has basically kind of accepted the fact that they are going to move Jalen Todd more to a slot inside type guy. DK McDonald kind of mentioned that on Tuesday. And so, you have him there, but even still, without Gibbs, that's one less guy that you could put out there to potentially cover against Arizona. So I don't know. I continue to feel like, I'll just flat say, Kevin, I don't have high hopes for the defense in this game. Like, I just don't. The defense hasn't really done a whole lot, I think, to inspire a ton of confidence. Against Oklahoma State, you're playing one of the worst offenses in the country, and Oklahoma State ended up being over 60%, I think, on third down, which was double what their average had been coming into the game.
Their first drive, they didn't even face a third down.
Yeah, so that's obviously, doesn't inspire a lot of confidence. So yeah, I can't sit here and say that I feel good about this KU defense matching up against Arizona. This feels like a game where Fafita is going to have a chance to maybe kind of pick apart KU a little bit. We saw what he did against Colorado with what? Did he have 5 touchdowns in the first half of that game against Colorado?
I lost count.
Yeah, exactly. And so that is alarming. And that kind of, circles back to our discussion about the KU offense, which is, hey, if you can play a little bit more ball control and possession and try to keep Arizona's offense out the field and maybe limit their possessions a little bit, that I think would serve to help you in this game.
Yeah, I think, the whole wee Willie Keeler, hit them where they ain't, type of deal it's kind of the way the Arizona offense has operated. And I think one of the things that you were talking about with cover guys is pretty good to talk about, because in the Cincinnati game, the position that really got exploited was KU's safeties. They were able to find ways of, okay, you're going to have Taylor Davis. I'm not trying to pick on Taylor Davis, but you're going to have Taylor Davis out there on a slot guy. We're going to have him run, a corner route with all kinds of space, and you get a touchdown there. And I think Arizona is capable of providing the same issues for KU, and that, hey, we don't have to go to the guy that Jalen Todd is covering. We don't even necessarily have to go to the guy that Austin Alexander is covering. We could potentially have guys working against safeties or linebackers or whatever, and that can be where we go. Defending well in the first half while Saeed Gibbs is out, I think will be a challenge, but at the same time, it could be one of those games where once Arizona's offense kind of figures out what KU's defense wants to do, Arizona could have more success in the second half because of that as well.
Yeah, and that's, again, concerning, because this offense for Kansas, you hope that they can keep pace. But I think, as you mentioned earlier, yeah, if this turns into a 42-35, 42-38 type game, I think that favors Arizona, and I think it favors Arizona by kind of a lot. So I don't love that. All right, let's take another break here, and then let's get into some players to watch and maybe give some of our predictions for this game. We'll do that coming up next.
Hey, what's up, people? It is Ben Heisler, KCSN betting analyst. We got a road matchup for the Jayhawks this week over in Tucson, Arizona. Jayhawks 4.5-point road dogs in the matchup against the Wildcats. We'll go through a play for that game coming up in just a second. But before we do, it's an opportunity to ask you what your favorite touchdown is. And for me, it continues to be the next one. Whether it's a first touchdown, whether it's an anytime touchdown, DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL, brings you all different ways to get closer to cashing in with every touchdown. I mentioned all the different ways you can get in on the action. You can do a last touchdown of the game. You can do a live anytime touchdown where the odds have changed, and you might be able to jump on a player that has much longer odds than at the start of the game because they just haven't targeted him with the ball. All different ways to get in. Remember, the best part of all of this is that new customers at DraftKings, if you bet just $5 and your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets instantly. All right, so the matchup in Arizona has the Jayhawks as a 4.5-point road dog against the Wildcats with a total of 56.5, juiced slightly to the under. We look at Arizona, they're 11th in the Big 12, but they're a good team. Like, I know that there's some things about them, 2-3 in Big 12 play, and you might be saying, well, shouldn't the Jayhawks be a little bit closer rated here? Look at some of their losses. They've all been close losses this year with the exception of on the road at Iowa State. Lost by 3 to a very good Houston team on the road, and lost by only 6 against BYU the week beforehand, and then they just went belly up and just destroyed Colorado last week. So 2 straight road games before now hosting Kansas. I think you're going to see some points in this game. And I know that Arizona's defense, when they've needed to, have come up fairly clutch. But I think you're going to see plenty of points. The Jayhawks should have scored plenty more last week. Slow start. Did not get off to where they needed to be. Remember, these guys were a 24.5-point favorite against Oklahoma State, who is basically punting on the season after the firing of Mike Gundy. So I look at this total and I say to myself, yeah, right now we're looking at a 56.5, and that key number of 56 is kind of gone at this point. But I do think you're going to see more points. I think it's going to be back and forth. The Jayhawks really haven't done a whole lot lately of slowing down opposing teams on defense. I like the total in this matchup. I think 56.5 is a fair number. And I think you're going to start to see an over here. So with that being said, give me the total 56.5 in this matchup. So again, if you are looking to get on board in this game, here's what you do. You download the DraftKings Sportsbook app. You use the code KCSN. That's code KCSN for new customers to turn $5 into $300 in bonus bets if your bet wins. In a partnership with DraftKings Sportsbook, the crown is yours. Remember, if you have a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY to 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Just call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly on behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas. Pass-through of per wager tax may apply in Illinois. You must be 21 plus. Age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. Bet must win to receive bonus bets which expire in 7 days. Minimum odds required. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, visit dkng.co/audio. Limited time offer.
This is the Peggy Podcast on the Kansas City Sports Network. I'm Nick Springer here with Kevin Flaherty. If you haven't already, please subscribe on Apple and Spotify on audio and also on our YouTube channel at Kansas Jayhawks KCSN for access to more great content, including videos from players, coaches, as well as all of our shows over there as well. And that's where you can join us for our live shows, including this Saturday. We'll be live after the KU Arizona game on Saturday night. Best way to know when we're live is to subscribe so you'll be notified when that does happen. You can also check out our preview of KU and North Carolina from earlier in the week. We talked a little about KU and Green Bay on the basketball court and also their matchup against the Tar Heels in Chapel Hill. We'll be talking a little bit more about that at some point over the weekend. Kevin and I will both be out on Friday night, but we'll be watching the game still, and I'm sure we'll have some takeaways that we can talk about at some point coming up later over the weekend or early next week. So be on the lookout for that. But again, join us on Saturday for our post-game live on YouTube between KU and Arizona. Kevin, let's get into some players to watch. And I think normally we do offense first, then defense, but I just want to kind of continue our conversation from the break about the defense. Let's start on the defensive side. Who's got your eye on the defense for KU in this one?
Yeah, I'm going to go with Blake Harrell. And the reason why is, I brought up the defensive ends, a week ago, basically because the defensive ends have struggled so much to create pressure. And it was another not huge game for the defensive ends in creating pressure. And I think when you look at this game and what you could do potentially to slow down Arizona's offense, it starts up front, right? You have to win up front. You have to get Mahdi to the ground, and you have to find a way to put Arizona into must-throw situations. And then when you do, you have to find a way to get some pressure onto Fafita. Blake Harrell has been KU's best pass rusher in Big 12 play, I think. And his ability to rush from inside, you can do a lot, especially against a shorter quarterback, if you can create sort of this collapse of the pocket on the inside. So I think he'll be important against the run. I also think he'll be important from a pass rush standpoint. And if KU's defensive ends decided, hey, let's go ahead and get after it and get some sacks out there, this would be the week to do it for sure.
Yeah, and on that note, I think on the defensive ends, and by the way, Blake Harrell should have had a sack and a strip fumble, or yes. He had the sack. He should have had a strip fumble against Oklahoma State. But on that note, on the defensive ends, hearing D.K. McDonald kind of talk about it from week to week, it's clear that he views Dean Miller and I think Leroy Harris is in this as well, in this conversation as well, as sort of these dynamic athletic players, which they are, and as guys that, okay, if we get them in space, then they can sort of lean on that a little bit more and they can make plays. And, he talked about this week, actually talked about, hey, if we line up Dean Miller a little bit out wider and he's sort of in more of a coverage role, and then it's bubble screens, then, you're getting a wide receiver trying to block Dean Miller versus a wide receiver trying to block a safety or a corner, whatever. So I think conceptually that idea sort of makes sense, but I feel like the way it's kind of unfolded on the field, Kevin, is that it's obviously taken away from the pass rush.
Yeah.
And I don't really know that the benefit the perceived benefit, I guess, of having those guys out in coverage more outweighs the loss that they've experienced with the pass rush, right? That's kind of more where I'm at with that. Like, I think it's a good vision. And I kind of understand, like, hey, you're right. Dean Miller is a long, athletic, and he's a lighter guy, right? So it makes a little bit more, maybe, conceptually, it makes more sense to say, okay, line up in a wider split, right? That allows you to use your speed a little bit more if you are pass rushing, and if you are, trying to play against the run or trying to play against whatever it may be, you're in more space and you can utilize that ability. But it just doesn't really feel like it's worked out fully in terms of on the field. It seems like, again, it's been a detriment to the pass rush because Leroy Harris early in the year, Kevin, and I think he still leads KU in sacks, actually, even though I don't think he's had one in a handful of games at this point. And that's because he was pass rushing and doing a lot, but it seems like KU's kind of gone away from that. Again, I think sort of along this logical theory of like, okay, here's a little bit of a lighter, leaner defensive end. So instead of putting him in situations where he's just, trying to just rush a 300-pound tackle, we can get him in space. Or like, it makes sense, but I just don't feel like the results have been there, I guess.
Yeah, that's fair. I think my thing is I get all of those things. I get running zone blitzes to confuse people and dropping those guys in coverage. All of that I understand. And I get that you're trying to show different looks and everything, but when it's 3rd and 9 and you want to send the guy, there's, people talk about a wide 9 technique, like aligning a little ways outside of the offensive tackle. These guys are wider than that, Nick. Like a lot of times they're almost lined up like a slot corner and then trying to rush the offensive tackle. And yeah, you blitz slot guys like that, but slot guys a lot of times are 4-4, 4-5 guys. They get there a little bit faster. And I think when you've had guys rush from that wide of a technique, a lot of times they aren't getting a chance to really affect the quarterback. And you're coming from the outside anyway, so it's not like you're in his line of sight really when you're coming that way. But even beyond that, I think, Nick, in the time it takes them to get there, if you don't beat the offensive tackle immediately, you're not usually impacting the play. You don't have time for a second move because you just wasted, all the time getting over there in the first place. And so I understand all the different things, and I understand not wanting to, telegraph what you're doing, but at the same time, in some of those situations, I wish, there are too many situations that you see like that where I'd like to just, okay, it's 3rd and 9, line up your guy as a defensive end and let him go rush the passer in a traditional sense. And I think that it creates different blitz angles and things like that when you do that as well, where you can do different things like twist games and stunt games, and you can move your other guys around a little bit. But that's my theory on it, and it may just be me. But at the same time, like I said, I do get the theory of, hey, Dean Miller can do some things in coverage. He can zone blitz and drop into different spots, and it does provide a different look. But when he's going to rush the passer and hey, this is a 3rd down and long and you got to get there, I think it's more valuable to put him up closer as opposed to confusing the quarterback by having him out there when the quarterback probably feels like he's going to rush anyway.
Well, and we're talking about a guy that was an all-conference player as a traditional, hand in the turf defensive end. Yeah. So again, to me, I feel like it's been more of a lose-lose because you've diminished, I think, a little bit of what Dean Miller can do at his absolute best when he is just sort of that hand in the turf, off the edge pass rusher. And again, whatever returns you thought you might get, on the outside, like, oh, okay, cool. Dean Miller chased down a play against Oklahoma State and delivered a big hit on a guy, right? But like, that doesn't feel like it's, it doesn't feel like you're getting equal returns on that. So I don't know. That's kind of where I'm at with that, I guess. We'll see what it looks like going forward.
I would just say real quick, and I know we've kind of belabored this point, but I would say the other part, Nick, is that for this defense in particular, getting a big negative play like a sack can be the difference between either getting a stop or not getting a stop. This is not a defense that if you're getting into 3rd and 4 and 3rd and 5 that you're generating stops, at a significant rate. You really need that play to put the other team behind the chains. And so, to me, there's more value in that aspect of it as well, where it's like, hey, maybe putting Dean Miller out there, in coverage makes it 2nd and 8 and it's a good player or whatever else. I just, again, think that there's more value in trying to create a negative play that could ultimately lead to a stop.
Well, and your point about 3rd down conversions is reflected in the fact that Kansas is bottom 5 in the Big 12 defensively in allowing 3rd down conversions. So, that's something that I think is a little bit frustrating as well. My player to watch, we kind of touched on a little bit already with the Saeed Gibbs discussion, but my player to watch is going to be Austin Alexander, because I think he is probably your next guy you look at is that on that outside coverage. And, he's had some ups and downs this season, right? He had arguably the game-saving play against UCF when he breaks up that pass in the end zone. But also you look at the K-State game, he gets burned pretty badly by Jace Brown. So I'm going to keep an eye on him, especially in the first half.
Home State too. And both of those were the same, where you had Austin Alexander in press coverage with no safety help. That's a tough spot for a redshirt freshman to be in.
Yeah. And I'm not saying that I blame him, but he was also involved in the play where there was that miscommunication that resulted in the easy touchdown for Oklahoma State as well to start the game. So I'm not saying that's his fault. I'm just saying, he was involved in the play, was part of it. So he's going to be my guy to watch, especially in the first half. Does Arizona go after him? What's kind of his plan coverage wise, and how does he approach it? So he'll be the guy to watch for me defensively. What about on the offensive side of the ball, Kevin? Who are you keeping an eye on for KU in this game?
We picked so many skill position guys that I felt like I needed to go with a big ugly up front. And
there we go.
I'm picking actually is Kobe Baines. And the reason I'm picking Kobe, Nick, is I feel like he's such an emotional leader in that group. When they're blocking well, when they're being physical, when they're knocking guys down. And you saw this even a year ago with a different group of linemen. They kind of fed off of his energy and his emotion. And I think for Kansas to win a game like this, they need to line up and get ugly in this thing. Line up with the intention of, I'm not just going to make my block, I'm going to displace a guy. I'm going to put him on his back. And I think that when you look at that front line, the guy that sort of has that attitude maybe the most is Kobe. And I think, you joking around about, hey, let's run HB dive. Let's run HB dive. Obviously, you're going to run some counters and zones and things like that.
It's all HB dive.
Yeah. But what I was going to say is you want to run the ball up the middle. And the way you do that is by, Bryce Foster in the guards, right? And I think that Kobe has a chance to really sort of stake his claim. He's had a pretty strong year, Nick. And I think that earlier in the year, I think he was tracking as an all-conference guy at his specific guard spot. With the thrills the offensive line has had, leading into the Oklahoma State game. Maybe that, died off a little bit, but then you have the Oklahoma State game. If the offensive line rallies in this one, Kansas finds a way to run for 250 yards and the Jayhawks win, I feel like Kobe would be a big part of that. And so, as much as the running backs are going to impact this one, I almost thought about picking the tight ends because they've had some struggles blocking at times. But ultimately, I think if Kansas is going to win this game, it's going to be because the offensive line, whipped some ass up front. And I think that Kobe is maybe the guy to jump start that and get that thing going.
I am doubling down on my pick. I picked Daniel Highshaw last week for Oklahoma State. And I said, hey, maybe he could have a Devin Neal-esque type performance. He didn't do that, but he did have a strong game. He did score a touchdown. I'm doubling down. Daniel Highshaw again. He's my player to watch. I'm watching him again. Again, we talked about it earlier in the show with him and LeSean Williams both seemingly being healthy. Like, this game really does set up for an opportunity that you can give a heavy dose of Daniel Highshaw to this Arizona team. We've seen him over the past 2 games now. He looks like he's back to his old self with the way he's running, right? Again, he had a couple runs against Oklahoma State where it's like, okay, there he is. There's Daniel, shoving guys, shucking guys, not going down out of bounds, that type of stuff. So I'm doubling down. I'm picking him again. I don't even care. Listen, this is our show. I make the rules. I don't care. I'm doubling down. Daniel Hishaw, again, I'm looking forward to watching.
Daniel Hishaw behind Kobe Baines, right?
Exactly. Daniel Hishaw behind Kobe Baines. By the way, HB dive, it's a blanket term. It applies to every run play that KU ever runs. If you run a toss sweep, it's HB dive. If you run a stretch play, it's HB dive. It doesn't matter. Whatever it is, just know it's HB dive. That's all you need to know about that.
I didn't think about toss sweep calling it HB dive, but I did think about you just kind of calling like every up the middle run, basically, like between the tackles.
No, it's any run play. It's a blanket term. It's any run play.
See, I couldn't do that because run plays are my baby, and so like they're all named. They've all got their individual talents. I love some GT counter. I love some different things like that. So I could not just have like a catch-all or whatever, but. My dad, you'll laugh at this just real quick. I know this is off topic, but my younger brother and I, sometimes he would yell for one of us. He'd yell the wrong name. He'd be like, "Hey, Kevin, come up here." And I'd come up and he'd be like, "Not you, the other Kevin," or whatever. So yeah, I mean, HB dive to me is kind of doing the same thing there to some of my beloved babies, which are all these run plays.
Look, power O, inside zone, outside zone, counter zone,
pin and pull. Oh,
it's all the same.
You're getting the heart revving, man.
It's all the same. You know what the outcome is? The HB diving forward to get yards. That's what the end result is. All right, let's get some game picks in here because we were talking off the air before we started recording the show.
Yeah.
And Kevin was basically asked me what my prediction was going to be, and I told him I'm curious what prediction is going to be too, because I wasn't quite sure when we started recording. So Kevin, I'll let you go first here. What do you think is going to happen in this game? What's your prediction?
Yeah, this is one before the season, like you said, I kind of just chalked up as a KU win. And I think since we've gotten to this point, just the way the two teams match up, the fact that KU is still, I feel like, as weird as it sounds for game 10, I guess it is.
Yeah,
KU is still relatively young and it's establishing the run journey. If this was last year's KU team where it was like, hey, this is what they do, they go out and run the ball, I would probably feel a little bit better about picking them to run the ball the way that they would need to win this football game. As it is, I think the talent that Arizona has on the back line, the way that they'll be able to at least theoretically slow down Kansas's passing attack. And then on the other end, the way that Arizona can kind of pick and choose. If Kansas pulls guys back and has light boxes, Arizona can run Mahdi and have a lot of success. And if Kansas says, you know what, Mahdi is not going to beat us, then you're going to wind up with somebody in coverage that you don't want them in coverage on. And so ultimately, Nick, I think Arizona has a little more firepower than maybe what Kansas is going to be able to do in this one. So I'll have Arizona right at about the betting line. I'll have the Wildcats 31, Kansas 28.
Yeah, I am worried about this game. And I will say, if it's 31-28, I actually like Kansas. But my concern is that it ain't going to be 31-28. It's going to be like 38-31 or 38-35. That's my concern. And as I kind of said, I don't have faith in the defense really to hold down Arizona that much. And with the offense, it's hard to say because I don't, we spent so much of the show talking about, hey, just run the ball. I don't know that internally they feel the same way about this game. I think that there might be a possibility that, KU does say, okay, you know what? Sure, Arizona has a strong pass defense, but we've got Jalen Daniels, we've got Cam Pickett, we've got Emmanuel Henderson. Let's just try to do our thing and keep throwing the ball, right? And that might work for them. Like I'm not saying it's impossible.
And they may say this is a game where you need 35 points to win, and the way that we're going to get there is you're going to throw the ball.
Yeah, there are definitely two schools of thought on that. Which is okay. If you're going to have to score a lot of points, well then screw it. Let's open up and let's throw the ball. Versus okay, maybe if we can control the clock and run the ball, then that will help help us not need to score as much. But yeah, I don't know. So I'll be very curious to see kind of what KU's offense looks like over the course of this game. But again, that just lack of faith in the defense really concerns me. So
Yep.
as much as I hate to say it, I think I'll probably pick Arizona as well. I think I'll go Arizona 42, Kansas 35, maybe.
Okay.
I think. I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't feel great about it, but I'll go with that. That'll be my prediction. So I think regardless, there should be some offensive fireworks. Now, some of it's going to suck because it'll be against Kansas, but I do think the Kansas offense will be able to score as well, regardless of what their strategy is. So it should be, I guess, a fun game, I think. But yeah, this is one where, as you said, and as we talked about at the start of the show, back in July and August, this was auto Kansas W. It was like, okay, going on the road to play Arizona. Arizona notoriously does not have a really great atmosphere out there for football games. It's it's going to be hot. I don't know if you saw the weather. It's supposed to be in the 80s, so it'll be a warm game. So who knows what their turnout's going to be. Obviously but then you look what they've done this season, and again, they are truthfully like 3 plays away from being 7-1. So this is obviously a team that I severely underestimated, at least in the preseason and in the offseason. And so now I'm worried about it. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. I think the Heat could be an undersold aspect of this. And as crazy as it sounds, Nick, I almost, wonder if that could help having Saeed Gibbs with some fresh legs in the second half. Obviously you'd rather have him out there for more plays than less, generally speaking. But just the fact that he's not going to be out on the field for, if Arizona gets to 70, 80 plays or whatever, that he's not going to be out there for all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's also something I'm concerned about. And again, it's a real bummer because, that targeting play happens with 4 minutes left in the fourth quarter against Oklahoma State. Obviously, the game was already well in hand. And because of that one play, you lose him for an entire half against Arizona, which is certainly a bit frustrating. So, all right. Anything else you want to add here before we wrap up this show?
No, I hope we both get proven wrong, right?
I hope so too.
That would be way better. And so, but no, it's going to be a tough game. The Iowa State game is going to be a tough game. The Utah game, probably a really tough game. But ultimately, Nick, I'm not sure that we've seen the best of Kansas just yet. They haven't put everything together, and especially not for 4 quarters just yet. And if they do that, if they do the things that we've seen at spits and spurts at different points this year, then this is a team that can win all 3 of those games. And so you would love to see them come out and give a really complete effort against Arizona and show up in that kind of way. And I think that would make you feel a lot more confident for the next couple as well.
Well, and I'll end the show on this. I mean, think about where Kansas was a year ago, right? Around this time of the season where they looked dead in the water and they ended up rattling off 3 consecutive ranked wins down the stretch of the season, right? And so can you maybe recapture some of that energy, right? Can you maybe find that extra gear to get to for this final stretch of the season, similarly to what you did last season to sort of end the year on a positive note? Now, I know last year, obviously, the final game of the season against Baylor didn't go how they hoped it would, but still, you got the win against Oklahoma State. Can you turn that into something here against Arizona, and then obviously build upon that with the bye week against Iowa State?
Since KU never played Arizona last year, do you think they could sneak Devin Neal into Harry Stewart's jersey?
There's been some various prediction, or I guess there's been some various thoughts on finding ways to get Devin Neal back involved. But hey, Devin Neal is playing more for the Saints.
Yeah. Also, it's been awesome to see. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Great guy. In addition to obviously a terrific player, so we're very happy to see him succeed.
No, I wish the Saints weren't absolutely terrible, but that's not his fault. So he's doing his part.
I wish the Saints held him to the Chiefs in trade deadline.
That's true. Yeah. Well, I wish the Chiefs would have done something. I mean,
Dang.
Yeah, do something. A little bit of Chiefs talk here at the end of the show. But No, yeah. The point being, like, I'm so excited for this game. I think it should be a fun one. Obviously, it's a chance for Kansas to get bowl eligibility. So, from my perspective, every game the rest of the season, because KU has that opportunity, I'm going to be tuned up for. I'm going to be excited for, and hope that Kansas can achieve that. Because, sure, even though maybe you've lost to both of your rivals this season, but still, I think that would be a step forward for Kansas to recapture some momentum at the end of the year, get to a bowl game, and maybe build off of that going forward. So that's why I'm excited for this game on Saturday, and I hope you are too. And you should be joining us for the post-game show immediately following the game on Saturday afternoon on our YouTube channel at Kansas Jayhawks KCSN. Come hang out with us and other great KU fans to talk about the game. And hopefully Kevin and I are eating crow because KU wins. So hopefully that should be a fun one as well. So until next time, he's Kevin Flaherty. I'm Nick Springer. We'll talk to you again soon. See ya.